Welcome to Grab Lives, everyone. I'm your host, John Vargas. Thank you for listening to the Grab Lives podcast. And I'm just really happy to be here today to support you. I hope you support me by liking, subscribing the YouTube, Spotify, and Apple platforms. Just got off work this morning. I'm pretty freaking tired, man. And I just want to let people know that I do this podcast as a heart-based project. And so I've been through the darkest times of myself, and I've only learned through my experiences, through pain and my mistakes. So I hope people understand that my full sovereign self shows up here every day. Everything I say and do on this podcast does not reflect the views or opinions of the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. And with that, I am offering something called the Inside and Out program. I help people transform trauma at a biological, emotional, spiritual, and emotional state. Any of these blockages that are coming into your life that reflect your relationships at home, your relationships at work, your relationships with your children, I get to the root of your problems, help you integrate them, and help you transform them. I'm doing the best that I can to understand my own stuff so I can help you dissolve your own problems. So if you're interested in this program, it's a 90-day program to transform your trauma. Reach out to the Grab Lives podcast and just message us to see, what you think, if you are appropriate for this program. The next, I am helping out the 343 Fund program ran by Angela Scudin. We just did an episode with her, episode 60. And it's a nonprofit that's in honor of her husband, who was an FDNY fallen firefighter. And it helps bring a holistic approach to help firefighters, first responders, find healing and integration with themselves. And if you get a chance, you may possibly even apply and get to do Ibogaine, which is a medicine that has been transforming many people's lives, Navy SEALs and veterans who have been trailblazing this with this medicine. So just check out the 343fund.org, see what they have to offer. And this may be for you, may not, but you could also donate if you want to help a first responder get the help they need. Also for today, I'm doing an episode with Charlie Brown from the Next Rung. I met Charlie at a peer support group conference, and he's got a really amazing process with understanding peer support, with understanding resources that are here to help you. He's put such a great emphasis on doing events and doing building a team to integrate their mission on reversing the mental health crisis for first responders. So Charlie's a great dude, man. He's a firefighter from Glendale Fire Department, and great episode. I respect him 100%, and I hope to band with these people to build a legion of people who really want to help and transform what's going on here. So thank you everyone for listening. I love you guys. Take care.
It's time for Grab Lives.
Let's go. Thanks, Charlie. Appreciate it, brother. Okay, so what we were talking about before we started recording.
Yeah.
Because I know this has been so very controversial and amongst all departments nationwide, right? It was like scheduling, not lack of sleep, and those things. And your department is
4896.
4896, right? So I've been on that schedule. It's an amazing schedule. Like every time you get off work, you're technically going home, right?
If you're fully staffed and you're working and you're not getting forced to work or whatever, you end up, if you don't have the staffing, your department's not fortunate enough to have that, then you end up working the opposite,
Right.
96, 48 or whatever. Maybe not that bad. You might end up working a 72, 72 or something. But yeah, if the staffing's good, then it's a good schedule, because like you said, you're going to work, you're staying to work for 2, and you're going home, You're not, this isn't the quick turnaround. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of different staffing models out there that are either being proposed or put in place, and the big, kind of caveat or the reason why they're doing it is all based around sleep.
Right.
Sleep patterns and deprivation and looking at the studies and cause and effect and all that stuff. And so, which is great that there's people out there doing the work in the study, but there's a lot that goes into it in terms of, like, you think it's simple, just changing a work schedule.
Yeah.
Or like, hey, like we're working this many days, whatever. But when you start looking at cities, municipalities, and so forth, you don't really think about what the reason they choose for certain work schedules. All comes down to dollars and cents and hours and overtime costs and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're looking at like how many hours in a week are you working, obviously depending on where you're at in the country and what they have, like, so like we're a 56-hour work week.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the 4096 covers that. There's other agencies within the state that aren't 56-hour work week. Are you, an FLSA department or
that's what we have,
right? Or you're not
Mm-hmm.
FLSA. So there's a lot of like little things that come into it in terms of how many hours are you scheduled to work
Mm-hmm.
in a 7-day period or 2-week period, whatever your pay period is, whatever. So it's less like, well, yeah, why can't we just change the shift schedule? Or why is this, it should be simple, but it's not. Like,
Right.
There's a whole lot that goes into it other than just like work the same number of days, 10 days a month or 11 days a month or whatever. This schedule does the same thing. But when the cities and municipalities start looking at it, they're like, yeah, no. And you're like, well, it would be really beneficial for our mental health wise.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why don't we, so it's good that they're starting to look at that and say, hey, let's maybe not worry about the dollars and cents wise and like how we're going to maybe facilitate this as much as let's take care of our people and,
right.
Make sure that they're operationally capable.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the biggest things was that the call volume is increased, especially in Southern California.
Mhm.
It's not the same how it was 50 years ago.
No.
When some of these departments were existing, right? It's not the same where you can like work these long shifts. And I'm sure you run into the same thing when you tell someone who knows nothing about first responders or firefighters, you tell them you work a 24-hour shift. They always have this response.
So you're up for 24 hours?
Oh my God, you work 24 hours? That's such a long shift.
Yeah.
It's the
Like, yeah, it is.
same thing every single time, right?
It can be, That's what you tell you always. Well, you never know. You could sleep all night. Or you could not. You could have a miserable night and get no sleep.
I know.
But yeah, like we were talking about before, these different schedules that are coming out. Obviously, we're 4896. There's the common one that we used to be with the kind of the Kelly schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of the other big ones that are being pushed right now, the 2472, which is a big one. But again, when it comes down to dollars and cents, you have to hire a whole fourth shift
Right.
to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you look at kind of budgetary constraints and
Right.
staffing, people, you can't even staff a department with 3 shifts, let alone add a whole 4th shift. So like, that's not necessarily feasible. And then there's the 24/48, which is a very common shift schedule around the country. Which I can't, like, that's all it is 24/48.
Mm-hmm.
And that just seems like, and that's the worst,
Yeah.
or kind of ranked one of the worst because you're just not getting any sort of recovery.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just interesting now, like these different modalities or different methods of work schedules. One of the more recent ones that I saw, which was very interesting, I thought, was a 24/72 48/72.
Mm-hmm.
So you work a day, you're off for 3. You work 2, you're off for 3.
Mm-hmm.
So you're still working the same number of days per month. And guys are like, well, you're not getting 4 days off. Okay,
Yeah.
but you're getting more days off, actually, over the course of whatever it is, 31 days. And if you take a day off, you're off longer, in terms of like time, your paid time off. Like in my shift schedule of 4896, if I want to take a whole go round off, right, I got to use 48 hours of paid time off.
Right.
But that does put me off for 10 days. Or if I only use one, if I use 24 hours of paid time off, that puts me off for 5. In that other schedule, if I use one shift, 24 hours of paid time off, that puts you off for 7. So it's just kind of like,
Right.
you're not using so much time, paid time off, as you maybe are in different shift schedules,
Right.
to get more time off. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've been used to like platoon duty for like a really long time.
Mhm.
I'm just like used to it.
Yeah.
And so I know like I know my the way I function within it. You know what I mean? I've
Mhm.
just been accustomed to it since I've been like 19 years old.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I get it. I think that over time, like the lack of sleep thing is just, it's bound to happen. You know what I mean? There's
Yeah.
nothing you can do around it. So that's why I help people to try to like understand like, if you can't fix that, then fix something you can.
Right.
Right. So, which is part of like the stuff that we talk about. And so, dude, I met you, I think we met at the peer support group conference. I was like sitting right next to you.
Right.
I didn't
We're
realize
I
who
think
you
I know
were.
that guy. I've seen him. I know.
Yeah.
That's
And
the
I
part.
had heard about you initially from my old captain at a different station I was at, Chris Gibbony.
Oh yeah, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was mentioning, he was like, hey, you ever heard of Next Rung? You know, and like he was telling me about you, and I was like, no, I never heard of him. And then I ended up following you guys on Instagram and following you guys as your passion project and stuff. So so first of all, you work for Glendale Fire Department.
I do.
So
Yep.
I want people to know like where you come from and stuff. And how long have you worked for Glendale?
So I'm an engineer paramedic. I've been with Glendale 15 years as a firefighter. Worked for the state of California for a little bit before that as a seasonal wildland firefighter out in Riverside County. Been in the fire service per se from various like cadet positions and whatever for almost 20 years, and then actually paid firefighter for over 16. So
Cool, man. And then I do want to know the origin of Next Rung. Like how did that came up? You know, how did you guys start that?
Well, Next Rung is the story of true millennialism, if you will. It came about at social media. So my partner, Blake Stinnett, who's a firefighter in Georgia, he came up with a name. His genesis for why he started it was in the mental health arena. He had his department that he was working for at the time had 5 suicides in 2 years. And so, and he was new to the fire service and he's trying to figure out like what the heck's going on.
Yeah.
Because when he was trying to become a fireman, that, it's always like you're trying to achieve the greatest job ever, right? It's the greatest career ever. Like why would someone, once you finally reach that point, and you kind of get behind the scenes and behind the doors and find out that there's people that are, taking their own lives, especially in that kind of rate or capacity, is like, what's going on? So he originally started Next Rung as a clothing company type, sell some shirts, raise some money, and then donate the money back to some sort of mental health project within the first responder community. And so he had reached out to me, found me on Instagram. Back then, I, was doing a lot of CrossFit type, stuff and posting a lot. And so he found me. He's like, hey man, will you, rock a Next Rung shirt out on the West Coast and whatever. And, yeah, sure. And we just started talking, had conversations and sharing our thoughts and everything, what's going on in the fire service. And slowly that evolved, to a great friendship. And then it was like, hey, do you want to do something together with this and transform this into something different? And so, yeah, we ended up coming together and laid out a plan for, hey, what is this going to look like? What are we going to try and achieve? There's a lot of things in the fire service that, kind of passion projects, if you like you're saying, things going on, physical fitness, which we're both into. Obviously we like just being into the job, right? The fire service culture and all that, which is cool. And we have a ton of friends now that are all into that. And like, that's their deal. But we wanted to do something a little bit more than that, and we had this saying, I'm sure you've heard it. It's kind of ingrained to you as a new firefighter, right? Is just kind of leave things better than you found it type mentality. And so he said, hey, how can we leave the fire service first responder community better than we found it? And, one of those arenas was the mental health aspect of it. And so we decided that we were going to address that. It's just kind of like 2 firefighters from across the country from each other with no nonprofit experience, not a professional mental health, anything. Just have a heart to serve and help people, and a desire to make, kind of things better. And so that's all we used to, launch Next Rung as a nonprofit. And we just, cause it wasn't about us. We're like, dude, this isn't about making money. It's about giving back and making the fire service better. So, we went on the adventure of what do we have to do to become a nonprofit? Got to get some board of directors people. So we searched around and found some, like-minded people from across the country and just inquired with them and if they would be interested in, kind of serving on the board. And in some very limited capacity, we needed to, fill certain positions, and would people be willing to do that? And we went through that process. So we started that in July of 2017, and then that whole process, and it worked its way through. We finally got our nonprofit status in January of 2018. So it's kind of perfect because it's like the first month of the year. And like we can just say, officially January 2018, Next Rung existed as a nonprofit, a 501c3. And we had to come up with a way, like, how are we going to make a difference for people, And so we decided, well, we need to be the biggest thing is communication. If you've ever been in a relationship or, obviously been around people or anything, a lot of it is just communication. Where do a lot of things happen? So we need to have a way for people to communicate. And so that's we launched our talk text line for people to reach out to. And originally just Blake and I answering phone calls and text messages, just him and I. And we said, if one person reached out and we talked to one person, then we would, be satisfied. But little did we know what would be in store for us over the, since then, and how many people we've come in contact with, and now what we have in terms of a team and stuff. But yeah, that's how it all kind of came to be, and just continues to grow and go forward. So
nice,
pretty amazing.
Dude, that's great. I mean, I love how when we create something, it starts to like become its own entity. It starts growing legs and walking wherever it wants to go. And you're just kind of like, have the reins a little bit and just like let it do what it needs to do.
For sure. Yeah.
I mean? It's really cool how that happens.
Yeah. We said we've always wanted it to be sort of an organic, growth. I mean,
for sure.
You kind of get this angst of, especially as a nonprofit, when it comes to, fundraising and things like that, where you're like, dude, we need to take this, we need to expand, we need to go forward. Cause we want to help more people. But at the same time, it's like, we're not, let's not push it in a way to where we're just totally hanging ourselves out there.
Right.
There's times where you got to take chances for sure. But the thing about our organization is everybody is active duty, and so it's like, we have careers, we have families, we have, other things in terms of our lives, priority wise, that, we need to be able to balance those things. And if we shifted all of our focus on the Next Rung and whatever, obviously things would start to be neglected. And it's a constant balancing act, just spinning plates, but yeah, so it's just organically let it kind of grow. And it's pretty wild where it's grown now. Right. So now we're looking at, it's 8 years, and we'll have, to this point, like we have a peer now, just to start from Blake and I answering phone calls and text messages. Now we have a peer support team across the country of, roughly 40 people. Yeah. That answer phone calls and text messages,
Yeah, totally.
Which is like, to me, wild. It's unbelievable. And we have people in set positions where Blake and I would handle all the operational type stuff. We now have a director of fundraising. We have a director of counseling. We have a director of the peer support team, right? Blake and I no longer are a function of the actual board of directors. We have a separate board of directors. Blake and I are now removed from that as CFO, CEO type positions.
Nice.
It's just like,
that's crazy, dude.
It's wild. Again, I didn't have in my life, when I pictured, my fire service career and all those things, like I didn't have running a nonprofit for mental health on my bingo card, if you will. So, yeah, batting 1,000 on that one, just kind of like, shooting from the hip, trying to figure out how to make it work. Been super blessed that we've made it this far. Well, we've actually watched other organizations that skyrocketed and did a whole, like, oh my gosh, like, why can't we be like them and have this kind of funding? And then they've already, crashed and burned, and we're still here. So,
totally, dude. No, that's why you guys are, I've noticed your success, and I think that everyone had some idea like, hey, what do we do for mental health? And then I think there's just a legion of people trying to decide, okay, what do we do for this? And I think like peer support's been huge because like, no one can really understand this community, this like culture, unless
For sure.
we're the ones who understand like little small nuances that no one can really maybe cope with or understand because we just have the knowledge and the wisdom from experience.
Yeah.
I think that human experience, human connection is one of the most important things,
Yep.
especially with community, right? Like I always tell people, a rookie, right, and they first come on the job, because you put them in a culture, and one of the things that's hard for them is how do they establish themselves in culture,
Right.
while sustaining their own self identity. So I think there's a lot to play in the role you play as a firefighter, as a paramedic, and how you want to see yourself grow inside of a department. Each department has its own culture. It's so strange.
Every fire station has its own culture.
Right, dude.
Like, you could have your own fire department culture, that's for sure. But I mean, every fire station, even in a smaller department like mine, we have 9 fire stations. I mean, every station is different.
Totally.
From obviously your response district, which can greatly influence the attitudes of those who work in the station, to the personalities and so forth. So it's I think over the course of my career, what I've tried to now pass on to the younger firefighters and as I'm trying to step into more leadership type positions in the department, that I find like that the greatest challenge that they'll face as young firefighters and moving through their career, the greatest challenge is really dealing with people, personalities within confined spaces, within the 4 walls of a fire station. Because obviously, depending on the size of the stations, big house, small house, you get big personalities, you get, small personalities, whatever. But that's one of the greatest balancing acts. You're just kind of like, trying to figure that out. All the other stuff we can figure out, right? We go to training, your recruit academy to probation to continual education, paramedic school, whatever it might be, right? Like we can teach anything in terms of skills, operations, all that stuff. The personal intangibles and functioning within a group of people of different mindsets, of different backgrounds, of different, belief systems, all that is by far the hardest challenge. You can strike gold and be like, land with people of all the same, not saying that's beneficial, but it makes it easier in a way. Because there's definitely benefits from being able to work in the nuance of different, personalities. But when it comes to your mental health stuff, it can be hard. It can really be difficult if you've never put yourself in that sort of arena. And this is where, team sports, as cliche as it might sound, I think plays a bigger role than you think. And it's not about being athletic. And people think when they relate team sports per se or sports in general as being like, well, I was an athlete, so the job is physically demanding. I'm athletic enough where I can do the job. Well, that's all well and good. But there's a lot of really athletic people out there that never, played a team sport or anything like that. But really, I think what you learn is like team dynamics and personalities and culture. I played football, so that was like my sport. And there was fights, like knockdown fights, like on a football field within your own teammates, right? You don't see that in if you're not necessarily in that space. So there's a lot to be learned in that type of background that it relates to the fire department. Yeah,
dude. Even going back to like that connection, human connection part, like, because I played soccer my whole life, club soccer, and football and all sports, man. But it was crazy because the sport I played the most was soccer. And when I was playing, I would play with some certain guys I've known for years, and my connection grew with them to the point where like we didn't have to speak to each other. We would just know where each other were at on the field, which is really amazing. Like, it was just as connection. It was just like telepathic. It was crazy, And I think as you grow inside like a team environment, a team dynamic, that starts to really inhabit like this brotherhood, sisterhood type feeling, right? And which I really believe is like one of the cornerstones of how how we grow with this mental health crisis we're dealing with, right? And I think a lot of people were dealing with issues with the 2020 lockdown where that severed that part of us, you
For
know?
sure.
So I
Yeah,
think
you
that
did.
broke a lot of like the polarization between like our viewpoints and what we believe, right? And I think that's one of the things, the catalyst that started shifting that dynamic within firehouses. And it just seems to be really, really estranged, right? And it really was a distraction from like, you know, what we're meant to be, what we're supposed to be doing here.
Right.
And when we show up to work, you know, and if we don't see these things, we're unaware of it, it can just sneak in. It's kind of tricky, right? If you don't have conversations like this for someone to see that, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that was one of the big things that kind of shifted things for people. It shook everyone's cage in a sense where like what's really happening, you know? And then if you have any type of like biological issue, chronic pain, or mental health issues already, you add some of this stuff to your plate, it started to kind of snowball into each person individually. You know what I mean? And I think what I was getting to prior was like, hey, like, you know, this mental health community started to like rise up. And I think it hit a plateau with a lot of people hitting a block, you know, with like working through whether it was crisis or just like just sitting in the middle with their mental health. You know, like you have really bad days, you know, and they're fluctuating in this wavelength of up and down experiences, right, nationwide. And so I think when I speak on some of this stuff, I'm speaking from personal experience. Like at work, like some of the guys ask me like, hey dude, how do you know this shit, you know? And I just know it from pain and my mistakes.
Self-reflection. And,
You're right.
you know, I mean, opening up your viewpoint, if you will. We can get very tunnel vision in
Right.
our own lives. But I think, not to say that there's an awakening, you know, there's a like I said, self-reflection. But you come to a point where you're like, oh man, like there's something greater going on, whatever. Maybe if I just take a step back and try to see the whole picture, if you will, and you get a different perspective. And then the conversations, and you might find someone that's kind of like-minded or in that space. And then all of a sudden you start having more conversations, and then, you know, things start coming out. And that's the same thing, like with Blake and I and our organization, like, even though we've been doing it for this number of years, and again, even when we begin, and I don't claim to be one now in terms of a mental health professional, not even close. It's just lived experience,
Right.
or even shared experience. And really that's, you know, where it comes from.
Yeah.
And so that's all we have, really, is your own personal story, or the stories that have been shared with you, in some aspects of, you know, with confidence and so forth. So, that's the best way to, you know, kind of go about it. And then you take that and you start breaking down that barrier of, you know, sharing your story with others. And that's where we're at now, I think, is you're seeing more and more people that are willing to share their story.
Yeah.
Which it now exposes people to more, you know, whereas before, like you're talking about being kind of that breaking, that connection, and where we're very like, just, we're in our own lanes, we're doing our thing. And you can look at how we've done this to ourselves, in a way, like fire service wise.
Right.
And I just give this example, right? So back in the day, and I know some of your fire stations still, have them, but like communal dorms, right? Most firehouses across the country, whatever, you put everyone in one room, right? Completely non-segregated, just big sleeping area, people, you know, communal sleeping area. Look at fire stations today, newer fire stations, so forth. What is it? It's individual dorms, right? Which is great. Love having your space, but what happens? Everyone goes to their own space, and we separate from each other. The communal areas within the firehouse are empty. Where is everybody? They're in their dorms when they're in the firehouse, right? Or whatever. Obviously, like the smart devices that we have pull at us constantly, and that's another subject. But yeah, I just think you look at that, just a small example of what we've done to ourselves, you know, that we've, out of the idea that, hey, everyone, you know, privacy and respect, and, you know, so that we can have a more diverse workforce and so forth. All good, 100%. But we've allowed that to now direct our behavior into being individualistic, and we're just worried about ourselves. And so then when that happens, we don't have that relationship with those that are, that we're working with on a daily basis. So,
dude, we're literally doing that to our dorm right now. We have a communal dorm, and we just reconstructed everything. Our station's old, dude.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's one of the things we did. We got some donated money. Now we're compartmentalizing things. And I do like, getting the idea of metaphysical separation, right? Putting up walls, between one another. And it's a form of separation from each other, individualizing yourself from each other as a tribe, right?
Yeah.
Essentially. And I think there's some parts of it that are important, because I cannot stand when the phone's going off in the other room. It's waking me up in the middle of the night, So that's one of the things that the pros and cons with some of this stuff, because there's so many different units and different like rigs that are moving around in our station.
Definitely, just like sleep deprivation wise, least amount of interruptions that we can get, the better.
Yeah.
So for sure, that's what I mean. Like individualization of dormitories and so forth, like not a bad thing. It's just look at what type of the behaviors instead of just using it. Like, not that you want to put a policy on anything, because that's the you shall or you never or whatever type mentality. And you don't want to have that, but unless you're like, hey, you don't go to your dorm, but only for sleeping, right? Like, no one's going to they're not going to say, hey, you can't go in your dorm until it's whatever, 6:00 at night. Like, that's not going to go over well. Right. But that's where we have to come together as a group, and this is the communal aspect. And if you have good relationships, and we're all going to want to be around each other.
Right.
But coming out of COVID and the lockdowns, and I mean, you were forced to be in your dorm. It was like, do not share space, which is just wild. But
I've been assigned at different stations where the community was so close with each other, but like the station dynamic, it's like almost too much where there's nowhere to retreat and recharge.
Right.
So I've been on different sides where I've had my own dorm, which is kind of nice to recharge. Right.
Yeah.
But then you would feel the separation, so it was like, in that close knit station, you'd sleep in your bed and you can, swing your arm over, you're touching the next person. Yeah. And God forbid someone's snoring next to you. You can't get, you know what I mean? So
there's a reason why I put stacks of toilet paper and earplugs.
Right. And then the awareness though is what we're talking about, is the separation state, right? And as you're having younger generations evolve and they don't understand community and tribal aspects of what we do, right? And what we do in the fire service is what I think is coming up, because there's a large, disconnect with the ages right now. Like a larger, younger generation is emerging. And so they don't understand the tradition of what I've been having for a very long time. Right. And so I think the talking about it is really important. But I do want to go back to something you were saying that I find extremely important, especially as a leadership skill in yourself, and evolution in general, is because you're seeing a zoomed out perspective, right? And I teach this all the time to younger members, and also, like, for instance, my paramedic intern I have right now, I teach him what I call the accordion effect. And what that is like you zoom in, right, with what you're doing on a call, and you have to do what you have to do. But at some point, you don't get locked in that state. You have to constantly move and not be static. So once you come in with the accordion, you do what you got to do, and you come out with the accordion and you kind of see what's going on, evaluate the situation, and use that as a skill and even an art form as you start to come into your career. And that's become such a great skill, not just for that as a paramedic or as a firefighter, but in human life, right? Like in our relationships, or what we see for the department, even your worldview. Yeah. And, so like, I think, I've touched on this before with people, is like our worldview as firefighters is really strange. You know what I mean? Because we see
the worst that humanity has to offer.
We see the underworld,
and
right?
then you're expected to just act like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And that's, it's wild. It's a challenge to, process. You're just like, wait a second. I just did this or saw this or whatever. And then it's like, like for me, just my personal example, because it's all I have to go off of, right?
Yeah.
Then I go home to my wife and my 3 kids, and you got to go into being, dad and husband, and like what you saw, did, whatever over the last 48 hours, like, you either deal with it on your own, process it, or hopefully you have someone to, talk to you with, about it or whatever, if you didn't have that within your own station dynamics or so forth, which is where Next Rungs really comes in and being just kind of an adjunct type deal. If you don't have that within your own station culture or department culture where you're sharing kind of what's going on, that accordion effect, like you talk about, really like that analogy, that you got to find it somewhere.
Yeah.
You can't not have that, because it's just, when left to your own devices, like that's when things can go a little sideways. So,
yeah, I mean, I am curious about your dynamic of how you come home, to your kids and your family, because that's a serious skill to come home after work, right? And you got kids, agendas. Like I always tell people at work, I was like, dude, I came home and I was like doing more work than I was at home than I was when I was at work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Sometimes going to the fire station is a lot easier,
right?
Because mostly like what the fire department does for you is it's planned out for you, right? I mean, you don't have to pick out what you're wearing for the day. That's taken care of.
Right.
Someone's on the cooking schedule, so you're going to have a meal or 2, or however your station works or whatever. Depending on what your position is, like you have your daily checks, you have, training assigned to you, you have all these, like your life is scheduled out and it's good. And you're like, all right, I can do this, this, this. And then you find things for yourself in between those moments or whatever. Some have a lot more things for themselves than others, but like that's how it works, right? When you go home and now, you don't have that structure, if you will, right? Obviously, like getting dressed isn't that necessarily big a deal, but for some, it's like you could be so, burnt out, wasted out that you're just like, dude, I don't even care. Just, PT shorts and flip flops all day, right? I mean, the firefighter, off-duty firefighter uniform, a baseball hat, flip flops, and gym shorts, like
sunglasses,
right? And sunglasses, like that's the like perfectly, definitely not perfect at it. Nobody's perfect, and that's kind of a message that we really try and push through with Next Rung stuff too, and people that reach out is that, and we touched on it kind of before we started recording, is that you're just doing the best you can. Nobody's perfect, and we all falter. So we got to give ourselves some grace in some regard. Going home to the family after a 48-hour shift or a 72-hour shift or whatever. Some shifts are better than others. They're not all going to be, like just grinded out shifts. And so we can't let it become like that all the time. But some of like good habits to create, it's just recognition, being self-aware and recognizing like, okay, in communication, like we talked about, communication is super important, especially if you have a significant other. Because I've been victim to this, my own self-doing of not communicating when things are not well, right? Like if you have a rough night, you don't get any sleep, and you go home to your spouse and your kids and so forth, they have no idea what your day was like or whatever. And so they're expecting you to just be you as normal, right? As if you had gotten a full 8 hours of sleep and, had your meals and you're going to be right as rain for the day. And it's not always the case. And so we can fall victim to where, without communicating that, the expectation is that we're good. Things aren't good. We end up, snapping, being short, tempered, whatever. Which then creates tension, which then creates conflict, which then right now we're like going down this spiral, which we can then too self-aware. Either if we're not aware enough to catch it, we'll just keep going down there and make it worse until it finally really blows up. Or we recognize it, we cut it off, and we say, hey, like I need to step away for a minute or whatever. But some good habits to kind of get ahead of that really is, again, just the communication. Hey, just heads up, I'm heading home. Like I'll, text my wife that I'm leaving the fire station. One thing is I always, say, hey, I'm leaving work right now. So that she has an idea, because we are both working, that when can she expect me home to take care of the kids? Does she need to get someone over to kind of fill in the gap if she has to leave for work and I'm not home yet, to kind of just, watch the house. So a heads up that I'm leaving the fire station right now. Should be home, roughly whatever amount of time it's going to be. What the night looked like, hey, I got 0 sleep last night, or yeah, we slept all night, all good, whatever. That's simple things, just so that they're kind of in their mind, they can be like, okay, he had a rough night, or he didn't, and he's going to be home and he's going to take care of get the kids to school and all those things. And then other things, obviously for our jobs, constant staffing, all that. Are you getting mandatory? Are you being forced to work? A lot, a little, communicating, trying to keep up on those things so that you're not getting blindsided by them. Luckily, like in my department, we use telestaff. So we hire 7 days out. So, the likelihood you're going to get hit the night before and be forced to work the next day without expecting is few and far between. So it's like, I know kind of 7 days out, like, hey, I get forced to work. I'm going to be forced to work the next day or whatever. So my shift is now a 72 versus a 48. But we can plan for that because we have a few days in advance. So, but it really just comes down to like the communication aspect of it, which I'm constantly learning, and trying to do better to do that. There's times where you just don't want to communicate. You're just like, dude, I'm just so tired. I don't even want to, but that doesn't really work out for anybody. But that's where, like, in our minds, we can go there and just be like, I'm so just done. I don't want to talk to anyone. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to, whatever. But then part of our resiliency is it's kind of built into our jobs that we push through those things. It's like, dude, I don't want to be dad right now. I don't want to be coach right now. But I said I would, and so I will. And, that is what it is. You kind of push forward and try to get to the next day. Every day is a new day, and you take those opportunities for, kind of some reflection and so forth. But yeah, I mean, that's just for me, kind of how I manage being the dad, the husband, the fireman, but again, it's always a work in progress. So, and then having good friends to be able to, bounce things off of, whether it's in the fire station or outside the fire station. I mean, I'm super blessed through Next Rung to have this huge network of people now that I can reach out to and talk to and see what everyone's doing. And, so, yeah, definitely a different type of dynamic, for me, but maybe not everybody has, but, yeah, that's me.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thread of conversation to have with, like, when you come home, right? Like, what happens for each individual person? Because everyone's different, right?
Yeah.
And, before I even began like this path for myself, I used to be a master at disassociating, and then I would shut down, and when I was on probation, I had an ex-girlfriend, and like we were living together, and like, dude, I was terrible. I would just shut down, no communication, no transparency. And it came to the point where, like, towards the end of my probation, like, all my shit was just like in the front of my porch and the door was locked. So like, that was the bottom other side of the spectrum, right? Of like how terrible it was at these things. And then, I would learn through, like I said, my mistakes. So I was like, hey, what did I do here? Like, cause like, I think I've always given myself some type of responsibility for the role that I played in a story, and I give myself the opportunity to learn from it. So I think that was like a big lesson. And so I was like, okay, how do I change this later? for a relationship, and I think there's an agreement now that I have at my home, and it's recharging and de-stressing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think having a personal practice is so important and vital for my system, right? And if I can keep from disassociating, the biggest thing is coming back into my body somehow,
Mm-hmm.
whether I'm going to work out or I'm going to go outside and just like lay outside for a second, and recalibrate my melatonin and things like that with sun exposure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I got a cold plunge in my backyard.
Yeah.
So it's like some of these things are so important, right? So that's one of the agreements is if I'm not recharged, if I need to get some time, some space to do those things. So now I can come in and do the responsibilities that I have to do in this home. And so I think like each person has to have something. If you don't have something, you got to have something.
Right.
And you have to be obsessed about it in a sense where like, I would say keep the body guessing is one of the biggest things, because also if you just have just one routine, okay, now you just become accustomed to it. Now it's just like you're robotic, and it's
Right.
kind of like you're showing up to work and you do the same routine over and over and over. Can be good for some, but when you keep the changing things up, you can kind of shift that within yourself, and you kind of have a better perspective to kind of like a Rolodex.
Yeah.
Right, to kind of pull out a card you need. You're like, I think I need this,
Right.
I think I need that more for today. Because I don't do cold plunging every day, but what I know from just practicing that, I know when I need it,
For sure.
I know when I'm just wrecked off a shift, I need to come home and take a nap. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest things is speaking about what is the best thing for each person, and I think transparency is huge, man. And when you mentioned that, it's like, if you don't have that, you're going to end up in an argument without a doubt.
Well, like a first responder, the fire service is what we're in, so it's most familiar. But I with Next Rung, we try and accommodate all first responders. I mean, and what do we consider a first responder? Now that we consider it kind of the chain of survival, if you will, or whatever you want to call it, right? From dispatcher to responder, whether that's PD, fire, EMS, to hospital, nurse, physician. Everyone within that chain is affected in some way, shape, or form. And so we offer our services to all of those arenas, and the spouses or significant others. We've come to know, having just seen it, majority of what we deal with or people reach out for and things, is surprisingly, it's not necessarily the calls. We do deal with those, but we kind of look at those and like, those are easy. We can work through a bad call, like no problem. What we see a lot of, and is far more intensive, is the destruction of relationships and trying to navigate those, rebuild those, so forth. So, we've talked about this with our organization, and where do we go? Because I like you're talking about the generational gaps between the fire service and like where we're at. You got a bunch of new people, right? We had a bunch of people that have moved on. So in like categories, if you will, right? You got your retired firefighter, your retired first responder. You got those that are kind of on that brink of retirement, right? Then you got like your seasoned veteran in the middle there that's, let's say 7 to 15 years or so, right? Then you got your kind of like adolescent, where you're 3 to 7 years, you've got a little bit of experience. And then you got your new, fresh on the line, and then you got your recruit, right? And where are we at now with the mental health game? We're kind of in the middle, like the adolescent, seasoned veteran. Like that's who the population, the mental health that's being brought to the forefront is in that arena. Because why is it being brought? Because of suicide, right? And who's committing suicide most often, or that you see or are aware of? It's within that demographic. And so there's a big push, and it's kind of like we're targeting on this. But our organization, recognizing, like taking that back seat sort of, or a 30,000 foot view, if you will, is we need to go across all spectrums and you have retired individuals that are struggling in absolute silence because nobody's paying attention to them. We're just like, oh, you made it, right? Like every time someone retires, it's like, congratulations, you made it 30 years, 35 years, you know, whatever. You get some special, you know, dispatch tone off and, you know, going away party and all this stuff. And it's like, man, you're supposed to be living your best life in retirement. Little do we even talk about the, you know, hidden sort of, you know, the dissociation that takes place because now you're something you've been so involved in for your, you know, majority of your life now is now gone. And now how do you handle that? So there's that needs to be, you know, it's kind of coming around, but hasn't been a main focus. That's on one side of the middle. On the other end, you have the new ones and trying to catch them at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, how do we get this message out to those in the beginning, and especially for young relationships? And if you're going to enter into a relationship with a first responder, conversations just need to be had. Transparency needs to be had. You need to develop, if for, you know, lack of a better term, like an emergency plan. Right. Like for when stuff happens, like, what are we going to do? Like if I have, you know, like you're talking about, it's really great to see all these modalities coming out now, because at first like, you'd see people like, what do you do for your mental health? Like, how do you make yourself, you know, recentered? How do you get yourself back? You know, and people would kind of be like, I don't know. But now you're seeing all these things that are coming out in terms of cold plunge, sauna, grounding, you know, whatever, like surfing, water therapy, you know, float, whatever. Like there's a lot of really cool things out there now that are more accessible than ever,
Right.
For people to do. So coming up with something within your relationship saying, hey, I recognize this. This is something that's happening or whatever. This is what I'm going to do. This is the plan, transparency, communication. That all has to be like laid out in the beginning. For those that don't know what they're getting into. You know, I think even you see it for those that are entering into the profession, I see it. Maybe you don't. But like when I tried to get hired as a firefighter, like that's all I ever wanted to do.
Yeah.
Like
Same.
that was my point. Like from my parents joke, you know, I was like 7 years old. I mean, every kid's, you know, obsessed with trucks and whatever, but I had a different sort of obsession with fire engines and whatever. My parents recognized that. They're like, dude, this is kind of different. And so as I grew up, like that was just kind of my thing. I didn't have any family in the fire service. It wasn't something that I was truly exposed to. So I don't know what drew me to the fire department when I was younger, but I, you know, whatever. But as I grew older, like that was my goal. I'm going to be a fireman. I'm going to, you know, even though I'm going to go to college, I'm going to play sports. I'm going to do these things. Like my end state was I'm doing everything to try to become a firefighter. You know, I got my bachelor's degree in the closest thing I could to, you know, sort of medical field, if you will, whatever, you know, it was sports medicine, you know, set me up kind of for paramedic school and whatever in the future. But yeah, I was like, as soon as I graduated college, I started testing. And when I got hired, super fortunate, right? You take a test with 5,000 people for 12 spots, 20 spots, whatever.
Right.
And I think now what you're seeing is that there are people that are coming into the fire service. They don't necessarily have that passion for like, there wasn't something that they always said that they wanted to be. They're kind of looking at it going, oh, this seems like a cool, you know, career. Like, what's it all about? You know? And so it can be quite a shock to them when they get into it and start seeing some of the things that, you know, the job requires. So, getting ahead of the game, making it like we need to be as a culture, we need to be brutally honest.
Yeah.
Like brutal honesty. There's a lot of things go with brutal honesty, humility, right? We got to be able to be humble and be like, yeah, like accepting the fact that you're not okay. You know, we have this saying, right? It's okay to not be okay, and trying to accept that. So we need to be able to accept that and just be humble enough to be like, I can't do this on my own. Or I don't know what to do. Maybe not that I can't do it on my own. I just don't know what to do. versus like, I'm going to take this on by myself and I'm going to struggle, but that's the way it's supposed to be. It's not. So, yeah, brutal honesty at the very beginning and just telling people like, hey, this career, again, you're going to see the worst that humanity has to offer. Doesn't mean it's not a great career, that it's not super rewarding. But all these different challenges from the family dynamics, the home dynamics, the job dynamics, are all going to come into play, and they're all going to be tugging at you, and they're all going to be, forcing you in different directions and whatever. And so you need to be aware of that and recognize when those things are happening. And then here are the tools and the avenues and whatever resources that you can use to help combat those things. So it's like a whole culture like shift. Catch them at the beginning so we can get them through the career and then support them in the end. Right now I said like we're stuck kind of in this middle part. We're trying to get, outside on the ends and capture both sides of the spectrum. But definitely getting in the very beginning is key, and especially on the relationship side, and being brutally honest with each other, and just like we need to have conversations and we need to set these things, expectations, boundaries, so forth. Like if you don't have those things, when those moments come up, that's when kind of some of the problems and stuff come up, and you got to work through those things. For some, it's, hey, I can't, like, we're just, not going to make it. But we're here to tell you from our organization is that you will. It's going to be hard, like anything. There's some kind of sweat equity, if you will, that has to come with it.
No, I think the main cornerstone is the brutal honesty.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And that's the cool part too, is like, if you're curious with it, like it can really help you evolve in a great way. Like, and your leadership skills start to hone in with that brutal self-honesty,
Mm-hmm.
like after I started the self-inquisition, I used it as a tool where I became really perceptive with other people around me. And there's been multiple times, dude, where I was at work and I said there's something off with a person, and I'll just approach them and be like, hey, dude, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And they break down, And so that's the cool part is now you're just giving yourself like something to build off of, and then you're helping other people. And that's kind of the whole point of this,
Mm-hmm.
And I think, it's a great thing to just format the younger generation to understanding, like to check in with yourself with the brutal honesty, give yourself at least once or twice a day where you check in with yourself.
Yeah.
And, it's high stress, so how do we bring the high stress down? Because once you have too much stress over time, that equals burnout,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm sure that's something you guys see is one of the common threads is burnout stage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we just have these waves of burnout, and it's okay to feel burnt out. Like it's just part of the job, over time, like we just get overworked,
Yeah.
and then we lose track of time. And if you lose track of time with lack of sleep, it starts to trickle down into a state where you feel like you have no energy. You just don't give a fuck about anything, dude. You know what I mean? Like you just don't care. And so that burnout stage for me, like I've had different levels of it and different flavors of what that means. But, I've hit levels where I feel completely numb to where I can't even feel anything anymore.
Right.
Or those states where I just feel like extremely exhausted to where I just don't have the willpower to want to train, to want to do anything at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I came to this agreement with myself, like, hey, dude, it's okay to feel that way. It's okay to just admit you're burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at some point, like, I came to this complex self-realization with it that, like, I don't really truly understand the volume of acceptance. Like, acceptance is really strange to see. Like, it really levels things out for yourself and stops something in its tracks from continuing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of times I've just accepted how I'm experiencing life, how I'm perceiving my reality, and also how I'm interacting with other people. If I am shortchanged with myself and I react a certain way and if I fall short,
Mm-hmm.
like that's okay. You know what I mean? But I can know that I have the self-reflection to grow on that.
Right.
And not create the same mistakes over and over. They say like, don't make the same mistakes twice.
Right.
So I think that's the self reflection conversation, I think, can go so far, because it can be really simple too if you have the right guidance with it. So I think over time, you can just break down just self acceptance. You can break down self realization of self, right? Or even understanding your interaction with other people. Like it just goes so far, man. But the brutal self honesty is, I think, it is really the best first start. And I think people are afraid of therapy. That's one of the big ones too. Clinicians. Because of the cultural competency, I think is one of the things. That's why peer support kind of comes through, and you have these mentors, right? And I think if I didn't have my mentors, I don't know where I'd be today, But that support system I had of people who I felt I could trust, who understood me, really made an impact on my change and my growth of my life. So one of the things that we do at home is we came to this standardized way of treating home life, and it's a set of values, and those values became these sets of principles and how we build on. And when we have values, we set up laws in order to support those values, so which is really great. So we have them written down, right? And we've collaborated between me and my fiance and our 10-year-old at home, right? So I think that's been really helpful because we have things that are actually written down, set in stone.
Yeah.
And we have a mutual agreements on how we support these things. And then on top of that, now we have a set of standards that we live by. And so it really has a sense of structure with relationship that I think has helped us, and I think that's really helpful to see something that's written down, even when you journal, it's so like cathartic and you're able to put your thoughts down on paper. You feel like you're less scattered,
For sure. Like it's easy within your mind to get distracted. You could be thinking about one thing and you're like, all right, I'm really going to focus on this, whatever. And then all of a sudden something pops in and you're like, okay, maybe, you're over here, over there, whatever. Putting something down on paper helps you stay in that focus of that one thing. And you might even break it down even further and like, where is this going? I love journaling. And big supporter of that and just doing that sort of thing. I think with the whole, your values, making those things known, making sure, being on the same page, that home life is clutch and key. Make sure you give yourself grace when, because we're never going to be 100%, right? We're never going to achieve 100% perfection all the time. That's not possible. So there's a good quote that I just heard, and it was through a book I was listening to, but it was like, you strive for perfection, you're never going to reach perfection, but in the pursuit of perfection, you'll find excellence, and if we can, be excellent in how we're, doing whatever it is we're doing, whether that's managing a house or our job or whatever, that's a pretty good standard. That's a pretty good place to be. But I definitely have to offer grace to ourselves and to others. I feel like in our job, grace isn't something that's very often given.
Yeah.
We are definitely hard on each other. And this just goes back to the personalities in a firehouse.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I don't know why. And it's the whole say, well, that's how I was brought up, or that's how it was done to me, type deal. Yeah. Operational excellence is, always a thing, type deal. I think we bear a lot more responsibility, or accountability than I think we necessarily deserve. You know what I mean? So a lot of times, this is just a very generic type of incident that people reach out for help with, right? Is a call that was a fatality type incident, a traumatic fatality type incident, right? And people are struggling with, could I have done more, right? They're very hard on themselves. Like, if I would have done this, or decision-making process, whatever, would it have changed the outcome of said person's life, And really the message that we want to give to that person, or that we try and, you know, give to them is, and our belief is that our story's already written. And so whatever the outcome is, that was the destined outcome of that incident. It's unfortunate that, you know, for us, we're in our line of work that we're placed in there and have to witness that. But it wouldn't matter if this accident, you know, took place in an operating room. This person was not going to make it. We're going to give them the best shot. We're going to do everything we possibly can. And we tell people, like, it sounds, when they lay out all this, like, you showed up to work that day. You were trained to a certain level. You responded to the call. You got there, you treated, you transported, you did whatever you had to do, right? You did everything to the best of your abilities and capabilities. Is there always something we can look back and go, well, what if I had driven 5 miles an hour faster and gotten there sooner? What if, you know, what if everything to death, and we'll never be good enough, right? We'll always be falling short in some regard when we do that to ourselves. And so, like, I feel like in some of these, you know, instances, like, we take on more of the responsibility of outcomes than we deserve. We don't need to do that to ourselves. And then that plays across other arenas, you know, where we see someone, right, who, whatever, isn't living up to some standard or something, you know, and so we take it out on them, or hard on them, or whatever. And I see this a lot amongst firefighters, you know, where I'm sure you've seen it, where you, like, shift war or type deal, or counterparts, right? Counterparts aren't getting along with each other. And, you know, and I tell my firefighters, that the expectations, we could set expectations for ourselves super high. It's awesome to have like, just go-getters. Like, we want to be, you know, again, excellent, right? If we're striving for perfection and we're landing on excellent, we're doing really well. And we want to make sure, like, for us as individuals, awesome, high performers. Not everyone's built that way.
Yeah.
Not everyone's wired that way. Not everyone is going to, you know, like, as much as we want to bring everybody along and everyone to be operating in the same capacity, it's just not the case.
Right.
And there's a lot of reasons why that could be. People have things going on in life, and guess what? They're just not there right now. You know, I mean, I've experienced that, as, you know, for myself. And so we can have our expectations for ourselves, but we cannot put our expectations for ourselves on someone else.
Yeah.
And when they don't live up to my expectations or your expectations or whatever, like, we can't come down on them and be like, especially if we've never told them what our expectations are.
Right.
Right. And be like, oh, that guy's not a good firefighter. He's not a good medic. He's not a good, or she's not a good counterpart, or whatever. And it's like, well, why? Well, they don't, you know, think the way I do. Okay. That's, like, not just because you want to go to every fire conference and you want to, you know, be doing hose pulls on your days off, and you're going to every USAR class, or you're doing whatever, right? I mean, that's all great. Good for you. But it doesn't necessarily apply to the next person. Are they meeting the standard of the department? If they're not meeting the standard of the department, then we have a problem.
Right.
Right? We all have standards that we need to meet. That's when we get operational. We get evaluations every year and make sure that we're doing, you know, what our jobs are. And, hey, are your rig checks being taken care of? Are your, you know, med checks being taken care of, or whatever? Right? Like, there's certain things like, hey, man, like, you got to achieve this standard. But we can't just put our personal expectations on people, not convey them to them, and then when they don't meet them, come down on them.
Yeah,
And
I think
we do that far too often.
Fixed expectations, you know, like fixating an expectation on something. Like they say, like, expectations are the root of all heartache, you know, because we create this envision in our minds, you know, and we'll in turn judge someone based off what you've created in your head, which is not real. You know, it's a false illusion of something that's not there, right? So I think the judgment is huge because you can feel that, dude. You know, when you're at a firehouse, you can feel being judged, right? And I think for some reason, like as human beings, we judge ourselves so harshly and criticize ourselves so harshly. And I love how you mentioned grace, because that's an acquired skill over time. When you realized how much you punish yourself internally with your thoughts and your emotional state. And I know we've touched on this before when I had Maddie Fiorenza on. Like, we had a whole episode based on shame and how it's a shame-based culture. And so the foundation's been, you know, revolving around the feeling of shame, you know, and we do everything in our power to not feel shame, you know, instead of accepting the fact that, like, it's okay to make mistakes and to grow on them. And instead, we just try to avoid shame at all costs. So we create these high expectations and standards on ourselves, and perfectionism starts to play a role. And I'll tell you what, like, if all of us were perfect, we would not be able to relate to one another. I promise you that. And so that's a beautiful part about this, is we can get outside of our own self-righteousness and our arrogance and understand, like, each role that we're playing in this fabric of existence has an important part of mirroring ourselves to one another is so essential to how we operate, and especially in the firehouse. And so I think when people understand, like, how these traditions and these things are set, and then they could be just an old paradigm that's just dissolving right in front of us. And I think that hurts people when they see that happening, you know. But to embrace the new change, new generations, teach them what those old traditions are, you know, and give them an idea of what your expectations are, right? To work in the same wavelength of frequency, and to start working together. But when you do that and you start realizing, like, just being vocal about it and just being communicative about it, like, it just starts working for some reason, you know. And I think I've just had so many times where I've taught younger guys some of this stuff to get it in their head, and teaching them that is it's like a breath of fresh air for them, because they feel that less pressure on themselves. And I can tell when someone's doing it to themselves. Like, I'll pull them aside and be like, hey, dude, why do you pressure yourself so much? You know, and we'll have this conversation about it. And it becomes a really fascinating dynamic relationship, because now that person knows we can trust one another, and establishing trust is huge, you know. And I think it allows for a form of opportunistic growth and activity within a team, like we were talking about, right?
Sure.
And I think we always try to please the coach, right? Because the coach is getting us on the field, and we're going over stuff, right? And we try to come together, band ourselves, and please the person, right? But I think over time, like, we've lost the connection part, where we've been losing foundational place to plant our seeds, right? And understanding our uniqueness in each other, and the judgment that comes through, right? The judgment just fucking gets a sword and starts slashing throats. You know, so I think that's the hard part, is that judgment. Because, dude, I feel like it's like a anthropology experiment going into a firehouse. You know, it's literally, it's so primal, watching someone who's working an overtime shift come into a station, come into the kitchen, and it's just such a weird experience,
like,
dude.
You know, who are they going to be? How are they going to be? What are they going to do?
Right, dude.
You talk about the, like, self-acceptance part, and that's key, right? You got, like, self-acceptance, and then that, in terms of, we're all searching for acceptance. Like, what is the crux of it? You know, we're searching for acceptance amongst our peers and our people and so forth. You know, we all want to be accepted in some regard. There's some people that be like, I don't care, whatever. Yes, you do. Like, at some point, you want to be accepted. You know, those people are like, I don't care what other people think. Okay. You know, I'm pretty sure that there's going to be, at some point, like, you're going to want some affirmation, some acceptance from somewhere. And in search of that acceptance, we will allow ourselves to do things or behave in a way, you know, shut ourselves down, right? Like, prevent ourselves from being ourselves in hopes of being accepted, you know? And that's, like, that dynamic of, like, well, I want to be accepted. This is the culture. This is what, you know, the way things have been or are or whatever. And in order to be accepted, I need to adopt that same sort of, deal. And this is where it's healthy and unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
There's healthy communal, mindset where you're all working together to achieve, common goal. And we're all just like, functioning well as a team and so forth. And then there's unhealthy where you're like, dude, we have groupthink and you are absolutely 100% wrong if you do not think the same way we do. Right. And this is where like the shift dichotomies and so forth come from. It's just, it's interesting. That's why, I say one of the greatest, reality shows, if you would, or whatever, is just literally the firehouse, like personalities and seeing how people interact with one another. Is so wild. It's just something that wouldn't prepare you, if you've never been exposed to it or whatever, even for spouses, who maybe only visit fire stations every once in a while on the holidays and so forth. Like it's, not really a true, kind of a view of what it's like on a daily basis, but always striving to be better. And it really takes, for people to kind of, to be brave. You gotta be courageous in a way to be able to, be who you are. And, to be accepted, by others. This is where you have to be humble. You have to be, a little bit of humility to be like, okay, yeah, there's different people. That's okay. We don't all have to be on the same sort of wave. Now, when it comes to like doing the job, like going to a fire or going to whatever, yeah, we all need to be on the same, wavelength here. But in terms of everything else, like, no, man, like we should all be, you can be whoever you are, and I love you, and as you are, and for who you are. I think you're talking about like the grace period, and like you're saying like why you put so much pressure on yourself when you're talking to others. And I think what that does is it opens the door, just showing that someone cares about you. I think in our careers and so forth, that too much of the time you gotta like dissociate yourself from being like caring. Like you can't care, because if you cared, then it would eat you alive. You got to be cold. You got to be stonewall. You got to be, whatever. Because that, otherwise, if you cared, then whatever, it would make you soft. It would make you unable to perform, whatever. I think it's all a bunch of BS, but,
yeah, I've changed my perspective on that. Like I saw my vulnerability as a weapon and as strength.
Yeah.
Because being closed off limits me in my experience with other people, and the more open I am in response to, first of all, open with myself and open with other people, it just allows other people to want to be more open as well. It's contagious in itself. Right. So, and I think it's too, like our mammalian brain has these ways of responding, and we're all the same. We're not different. We desire this, animalistic tribal experience, and that's really, I think, for a lot of the crisis, people get somewhat isolated, and that can really be harmful for someone. And I think when people get injured, that's one of the biggest things, and that's what starts it. You feel like you're in isolation, you feel like you're disrespected in a sense, and like you start to lose a sense of self,
Yeah.
and it's only natural to feel that way, but if you can get into like how our makeup has created natural responses within us, I think having a conversation like this gives people a sense of like they don't feel so alone, and they don't feel so like lost, because it's just natural, it's normal, it's okay.
Right.
And even bringing up the concept that it's okay to not be okay, it's honesty, you know. And I think honesty can go so far in between when you just make it simple. And when you're honest with yourself, you can be honest with others. And that's what allows more opportunistic moments within yourself and other people, especially in the firehouse, man. It's crazy, dude. And I can't relate to police officers as much. They have such a weird dynamic.
See, like, we're built on being in tight quarters, if you will, with other people. My brother-in-law is a law enforcement officer, and they have a team.
Mm-hmm.
They're all on the same team, if you will, right? They do briefing, but then they all they
Right.
shoot out in their own individual police cars and they do their own thing. And so they're kind of built on the daily basis. They're built on an individual type, deal.
Mm-hmm.
And so for them to be kind of isolated is somewhat normal
Right.
for them. Versus like, talking about it in a communal aspect. Whereas like, for us, we're all always together in some fashion, even if you're on an RA, you're with a partner.
Mm-hmm.
If, you're in a single station or a single engine house, you're 3 or 4. Big station like mine, we have 14, because we're a full truck engine battalion, ambulances and so forth. So, we have a lot of people there, but so when stuff happens, it's easy to find someone to bounce something off of or whatever. We come together as a group, whereas with law enforcement officers, it's just not the case. Because their setting is you're in a police car by yourself,
Right.
unless you have roll 2 to a police car or something like that. And so yeah, it's just it's so many the things that we do, the way we act, behave, is built so much subtly on just how we function on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
If you function individually, because that's the performance nature of your job, you're gonna do things individually. Be more apt to it. And then if you do things more in a communal aspect, fire service and so forth, like you're gonna be more apt to be able to function in a group type, deal. I'm not saying that that's for everybody. Just playing the odds, per se. Don't get me wrong. If you're a law enforcement officer out there and you like to party and you like being around people, it's all good. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but I just think that our environments really play a part on how we handle ourselves and, how we go about trying to deal with things and so forth. So kind of like that whole, you're a victim of your own kind of environment or whatever, really does kind of come into play in that regard. And recognizing that. And again, it just comes down to self-reflection and kind of communication, and you got to be open to it, and this is just, you got to be open. It's taken me a long time to get to this point, and I'm working on it on a constant daily basis of being more self-reflective, recognizing when I was wrong, recognizing like I did not handle that well, whether being short-tempered or being isolated, and so forth, and trying to be better. It's always about trying to strive to be better. I've never been perfect. There's certainly a lot of things that regret doing, or not doing, or, and whether that's in my marriage or on the job or whatever. So, just, being a person of growth and, in all aspects. And I think if we can bring that sort of mentality to our people, where, like, you are not defined by what you do today or in this moment, right? Like, you make a mistake, you do whatever, like, that doesn't necessarily define you. How you go forward, and so forth, will be a much better idea of who we are as people. And so, when people reach out for help and stuff and they're like, hey, I made it, something's gone sideways, whatever. Okay. It doesn't mean like you're a terrible person, or that you're just, that your career is over, or that, all things are, whatever, like just completely out the window. Your life's over, because we've heard this a lot. I mean, where people are like, there's nothing else. They can't survive. There's nothing that can fix this. And, what's the point type, mentality. And it's just like, okay, for one, need you just take a deep breath. Right. And this is where having someone come alongside you. And this is what, our organization, we say, we're going to come alongside you. Right. We're not going to make decisions for you. This is kind of the pure support model, right? Like, you don't go in and tell someone what they need to do, what they don't need to do. You're there. You take up space for them. You stand beside them. You talk when talking is appropriate, but you just sit there in silence if that's what's necessary, right? But you come alongside someone and you say, hey, it's not all over. There is it will get better, right? Like for some people, you look at it and you go, hey, how long is it taking to get to this point? Right? If you've got something that's been going on for a number of years, like, hey, it's taken so many years for you to get to this point where you're like, I'm done. I can't go any further. We need to have an understanding like, well, it's not going to change tomorrow, right? It's taken us this long to get here. It's going to take us that long to get out of it. But we need to have a mindset of like, okay, I recognize I'm growing. I recognize where, maybe I was flawed or at fault or whatever. I recognize that I can't do it by myself. I have someone to do it with me. Not alone. It's okay. All of those things in shaping our mindset will help expedite our, growth out of those deep holes, in our lives. And so that's, what for us in our organization and so forth, trying to offer that to people, and spread that message so that maybe Next Rung isn't necessary. It's kind of one of those things like you're trying to put ourselves out of business, right? Like if we changed everyone's mind and we made everybody resilient and everyone recognized that it was okay to not be okay, and that they're flawed individuals and that no one's perfect and that things happen, and bad things happen to good people, and it's the way of the world. Nothing you can necessarily do about it. It's not your responsibility. It's not your fault. That we'd put Next Rung out of business, which is a good thing. But that's not going to happen any time soon. So we'll just keep pushing forward and trying to get that message out there for people. And hopefully, if you're sitting there and you're thinking about it and you're like, I don't know what's going on, or maybe something, like really just take a minute and self-reflect and just be like, really even like go back down the line on timeline, and be like, where did things really start to go sideways? We do that a lot. We do a lot of like fact finding. It's kind of interesting. Being a peer supporter and helping someone through really helps. Like for me personally, having, helped a lot of people through, I find I get a lot out of it,
Yeah, for sure.
and like peeling the onions back, peeling back all these layers. Cause like you're helping someone work through their stuff. Next thing you know, you're like, I have that same deal, like,
yeah, for sure.
So
yeah, the common thread I've seen is our attachment to our stories that we tell ourselves that aren't even true, which is insane. Right. And it's just like a funny thing because like I accepted the fact that I'm a little bit of a psychopath in that, because I've created somewhat of an illusion in myself that has nothing to do with what's actually happening. And so that's when I do check myself at that point. I'm like, hey, dude, is this the story or is this the truth? Those are the things I will check in with daily.
Yeah.
Right. And like seeing what events have led up to like a conflict or a disagreement that I've had at work or at home. And I think that's, it leads me to what's the root of it, and I think when, what kind of revolves around it is our patterns of behavior, and like those patterns, like we learn them from somewhere and we learn them from someone,
right?
One of the two. Right. And I think what over time, like, it's just, though that's a good way to kind of go backwards and trickle down to like these tentacles. They're kind of like latched on to things, and they're attached to that, which is making you attached to like the story you're explaining to yourself, and take advantage of that. That little trick is really easy, and I think when someone's in crisis, it's a bit different. You can't just be like, hey man, you're telling a story to yourself. It's not real. You can't say that to someone in crisis.
Yeah, no.
So I think the compassion part starts to come through as a peer supporter when you're helping someone in crisis, because someone just needs to be heard. I think someone in crisis,
right?
That's it, because they've just hit rock bottom, and I think over time, when you meet some people in crisis more and more, you get better at just listening, which becomes another great skill that you can use as just active listening. And people just want to be heard, man. That's all they want. And I think all of us just want to be heard in a sense, right? And we all want to have a voice, right? And there's just there's flavors to that as well, right? You have to be careful with not stepping over people's boundaries and just understanding when it is right to speak and when it is right to listen. And so in this arena of human behavior, I think if we get more people to do peer support, we get better at the dynamic in the firehouse. We get better at being a good police officer, because when things go sour with the people you really do care about, you can be a really good attribute to the situation or the function of what's been dysfunctioning for a long time, which I believe right now, like the dysfunction we're seeing it's going to take all of us to do that. It doesn't take one person. You know, it takes all of us to want that change, because we see an issue that's going on, and it's not going to happen from an administrative perspective. It's not.
Right.
Let's just all accept that fact. It's going to happen with people, the blue collar workers who are showing up every day to work, who kiss their families before they leave to work. Those are the people, those are the experiences that are really going to meet this paradigm shift. That's going to happen. Yeah. It's going to happen no matter what.
Right.
Because we've been tired of being a beat down dog, you know, and I think it's a common thread with all of us that we see administrative betrayal, right? And we all feel that wound, man. So let that go. Take the greater responsibility in yourselves. You're not going to change it. I'm sorry. The politics involved, the money involved, we know it's dirty. Yeah. We can just let that go. But what we can do is support one another. Yeah. What we can do is change ourselves. What we can do is learn how to grow within these simple skills of self-reflection and listening and being able to connect with one another. And that's really what I think is going to be the big change that's going on. It's human connection, man. Yeah. You know, I think we're tired of hearing clinicians speak all the time at these conferences. We want to hear real human experience. When you go to these conferences and you hear someone tell this amazing story and it's heartfelt, that's what hits. Right. Instead of like this clinician saying, "Oh, hey, I'm giving a same presentation that I gave like three months ago. And it's the same dynamic." And it's like, dude, you're just feeding me a bunch of bullshit. I want to hear human experience from now on, you know? Yeah, totally. I think the within the firehouse, within your station, like you're talking about the disconnect, you know, from administrative or management and line type personnel and so forth, you know, and changing the culture and how we treat each other. People ask all the time, like, "Hey, how do I get involved with Next Rung? How can I be, you know, a part of it or whatever?" And just simply we don't have the capacity of, you know, people wise to be able to have, I mean, we would love to have, you know, a peer team that's hundreds of people, but we can't. We just tell people like, "Hey, start in your firehouse. Be that person. Be the person that's willing to listen. Be the person that's willing to ask how people are doing and actually mean it and like care." You know, I think we get lost in society, a societal issue of like, "Hey, how you doing?" Like, you're asking that question. And if I told you, are you really going to care what I say? You know, because we say it in passing. Right. And like, if you really want to test it, I mean, people are like, "Hey, what's up? How you doing?" Whatever. "Oh man, terrible." And watch how they respond. And they're either going to be like, "Oh, wow, what's going on? Like, tell me, you know, what can I do, or what's going on?" Or they're gonna be like, "Ooh, yeah," you know, like they get real comfortable and they're like, "All right, next thing, like moving on." And so like that's really a test of the societal condition of our hearts, you know. True. Like where are we at? In terms of the fire service and what's going on geopolitically and all that stuff, and like keep that stuff out, you know. And we just like for Next Rung, it's the same sort of deal. Like we just care about people. I don't care about what your background is per se and all that. Like we just care about you. And if you just show signs that you care, and then people, you know, be like, "That's different." And, you know, that means something. And I think within our own fire stations, you know, we can change that. We can be like, "Hey, we care." You know, are we doing stuff together as a family? The aspect. I mean, I remember, you know, you talk about the fire service and
what are the things that draw you to the fire service? Whatever. It's like, oh man, like, you know, it's just a big family. I watch that movie Ladder 49 and they get together for barbecues and whatever, right? You're like, it's like that all the time. And it's not, because obviously we all have lives and we all have, you know, we're busy and everyone's spaced out and lives far away or whatever, right? So that's not necessarily always going to be possible, but the opportunities that we do have to come together is important.
Yeah.
You know, from the union side of things can be supported. You know, I think in my department they do a really good job. We provide a course for spouses called the Significant Other Survival.
That's pretty cool.
What's put on by the Counseling Team International comes in and taught by a fire spouse, and she does a great job.
I like that.
And so we invite all the spouses, and the union does, you know, pays for that, pays for the class, pays for all them, and, you know, give them a little brunch or whatever. But, you know, so like, what are we doing in that regard to show that we care about each other on more than just the showed up, hey, what's up? Okay, did my 48 and I go home. You know, that saying the paydays in 4 days, fireman that's just there, shows up, goes home, doesn't really care about being invested in anybody else, just wants to be invested in himself. And we all got our own problems. Don't get me wrong. Like we all have things that like are unique to ourselves. It's totally fine. But we do need to open up ourselves and, you know, be aware of what's, you know, kind of going on around us and care, you know, and not just be like, well, it sucks for that person. You know, that guy's going through a divorce. There's another one going through a divorce. Like, man, sucks for those guys. You're like, well, yeah, it does suck. You know, what are we doing to help them? Like, what are we doing to be like, hey man, like, are you doing okay? Is, you know, anything we can do with your kids? You need help with anything? You know, and obviously not going to save, not looking to come in and, you know, save anybody's relationship or anything like that. But like, hey, like, are you being supported? Is there anything that, because right now you're obviously dealing with it on your own, you know, which is hard. And so like, how can we just open ourselves up to care, get outside of ourselves, you know? And I think we struggle with that now more than ever, because I think there's a lot of demands on us, especially in California. You know, I think when people ask about, I go to places like FDIC and travel across the country, whatever, talk to other firefighters, and they're like, what's, you know, being a fireman in California? Like, oh, it's gotta be, what is it like? And I tell people the hardest, you know, one of the hardest parts is, you know, the politics for one, but two, it's just the expectations. Like we're expected to be a lot more than just the firefighter.
Right.
You know, I mean, we're in what people across the country would be like, you're in your dress uniform, you know, or badge shirt. Like we're in our badge shirts all day, you know, across the country. That is not the case. Across the country, they're wearing shorts, they're doing whatever, right? Like not in California, right? Like the idea of what a professional firefighter is, this, you know, visual, if you will, right? The high, tight, you know, dialed in uniform all the way up until you go to bed. You know, and everything that goes in between, because everyone's like, oh yeah, you get paid California fire money and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yes, we can have a different discussion on that, where that goes, but, or how far that goes. But the expectations, like, yeah, they're going to pay you this much money. Guess what? You're going to, you know, you're going to do a lot more than just run 911 calls.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And because there's so much more expected of us, which is not a problem. I don't mind, like, hey, that's what we signed up for, you know, in a way. Like we signed up to be servants of the public, and this is, yeah, we are a tax funded, you know, entity. Like if that's what they expect, then that's what they expect. Like what is what it is. But because there's so much more expected of us, that it's like we're giving all of ourselves to that. Like we don't have anything left over for each other, you know, and guys are like, dude, I come in, I give the city or the county or whoever you work for, like I give them my time and I'm done. Don't ask me for anything else.
I think there's a balance with that one, right? Like, and I've discovered this in myself, because like and this can be good for all peer supporters and even people from Next Rung to understand this. There's something called martyrdom syndrome,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when you give everything outside to someone else and you have nothing left. So there is a balance with that, right? And then we go to work, we show up, we give so much. If you're a peer supporter, you're here to support other people, and by the time you get home, what's there for you? So I've caught myself in that. I don't know if you have, where I've just felt so drained, dude, because I've got caught up to carry the world on my shoulders, and I have to, someone else, a really good mentor, explained that to me. And I don't think I would have understood that if I had talked to someone in their 50s who'd been living that experience, been there, done that. And then they explained it to me. Hey man, like, be careful, because you can't, if you give everything to everyone else, now you'll get burnt out with that. Okay. So there's a balance with it. So, making sure you can show up to work and don't make it seem like you're just clocking in, clocking out, and you're just receiving a paycheck. That's important to make sure there is checkpoints with yourself. If you can give yourself those small checkpoints, hey, where am I at? Small check-ins. Do I have anything to give? And what do I have left to give to my family? What do I have left to give to myself? And if you can't take care of yourself, then you're worthless to anyone else. You're just going to be depleted. You're just going to be a robot. You're going to go through the motions. You're going to go through autopilot. And I recognize that when I go to work, I'm working multiple shifts. I'm now on autopilot. How is my patient connection? You know what I mean?
Right.
How is my connection to my team? And so I think it's an important thing to bring up for people who are also doing peer support outside, because it's voluntary.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Because you feel like you care.
You're offering up another piece of yourself. It's like the yes man syndrome.
Yeah.
You're always saying yes to everything.
Right.
And I fell victim to that young in my, career.
Same.
Where you're just like, I want to be present for everything. I want to
Right.
do everything. I want to be a good employee. I want to be a good firefighter. And that means like showing up on every, volunteer opportunity, program, sign me up. I'll do it. Right. And even like in person, and our personalities, type A personalities and whatever, right? Then it bleeds over into our personal life. I'll coach that team.
Right.
I'll do that. I'll do, and then next thing you know, you're like, my wife's like, no, you can't do that. We have to be, like,
Right.
Oh, I can't do that. Okay. So, we find ourselves in that regard. I had a captain once that was really good. And it was, you kind of three things, one thing for the city, one thing for the department, and one thing for yourself in a day. Right. If you accomplish those three things, like what are we doing for the city or county, whoever you work for, the one thing for the department, what are you doing for the department today? And then, what's one thing for yourself? And if you accomplish those three things, anything else, is extra, but yourself is in there. Like, what are you doing for yourself today? Because you got to have that. If you piece yourself out to everybody else, then what are you doing? What's making you fulfilled? I mean, there certainly are people that are fulfilled, like they are service oriented.
Right.
And that's our job, is service oriented. But, and so they get fulfillment from that, but there's got to be something more.
No, that's true leadership though. You know what I mean? To have a captain who's going to explain that to you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, I think the leadership part too is like, you have like a disjointed leadership. It's like you got half and half sometimes, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You got good leaders who understand like their sovereignty and their own, like you just look at their personal life and how that reflects, right? And that's going to be like a great example on what a true leader is. That's usually why I kind of view it as, like, instead of just listening to someone with blind faith.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that I've learned the hard way with that one. And then like, I know I had a captain who just like wanted me to be like him. And I knew he saw a lot of himself in me, like pieces of that.
Sure.
But he tried to groom me in a certain way that I resisted because I didn't want to be like him. I actually became like an asshole like him. And I had a good friend tell me, like, hey, dude, you got to leave this station because you're becoming an asshole. And I actually saw my friend become more of a leader than that captain because he told me the truth.
Right.
And I needed to make some changes. And so I think this dynamic, man, of this career is so fascinating, dude, because you
It
can
is.
run into so many different people.
So many things.
But you know, like what's the biggest thing is knowing yourself. And like that's like this famous quote, "Know thyself."
Mhm.
You know, because if you don't, you're now gonna give away your own power to other people. You're just gonna be a yes person, a good soldier, and you got nothing left to give, man. And I
Mhm.
think if that is taken from you, you feel like you feel a bit of guilt and shame from
Sure.
giving your power away. That hurts
Mhm.
deep. It becomes a wound, essentially, right? And
Right.
you got to go backwards and reprocess all that shit.
Yeah.
Um, it's important, dude. I really think it's valuable. So I was curious if there's anything else about Next Rung that you feel is important to hit on and what you guys offer. Because I do want to make sure like people are aware of what
Mhm.
organization of Next Rung offers. That hotline's beautiful, dude.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys do that. That's huge. But I know you guys have held so many events. I've been to the boxing events
Yeah.
with you guys.
Mhm.
So yeah, if you have anything at the top of your head you think that you'd like to express.
Yeah, I think Next Rung's got a lot of things to offer. We kind of consider it like our lines of defense, if you will. So the first line of defense is the talk text line, and that's obviously the greatest avenue for us to make an impact with people. And we'll put that in the show notes, or whatever. But it's a simple 833 number, NXTRUNG 833 Next Rung. And people can reach out, text message, phone call, and get in touch with somebody. Right? We coordinate the peer support team on the backside of whatever. But the next step, we recognize that it's not just the peer support. I mean, that's the greatest thing we can do. And we hope that that's all that we need to do. But in the event that that's not enough, we recognize that, professional counseling is a viable option, right? It's a real thing. And so as a nonprofit, the money that we raise, like, what do we do with that money? Well, no one in the organization, I'm sure you've seen some of this stuff in the news lately with like the some of the NGOs and the nonprofits all paying these executive salaries. Like, believe me, we're not there. We don't take that money. All that money goes back into helping other firefighters and first responders. And so we use that money to pay for treatment. So we pay for counseling for the first responder and their spouse or significant other if they need it as well. And how that works is we pay for 6 sessions, like right off the bat. And we work with the Counseling Team International to help, because we're a national organization, to help find culturally competent clinicians, for people across the country. Sometimes they're in person, sometimes it's telehealth. It's, however we can facilitate that. But we get them in touch with our director of counseling, Robert Arrieta, who's a lieutenant out of New Mexico.
I've heard of that guy.
Yeah, right. And he does he has a thing called Skulls for Hope. But he also manages our counseling direction, across the country. So Robert gets in touch with them, coordinates with the counseling team, and we get people lined up. They get 6 sessions paid for 100% right off the bat. Free to use however you want. No questions asked. We don't even don't care. Just if someone says, hey, and the counseling comes about in 2 separate ways. One, someone recognizes that they need it and they say, hey, I want to go see a counselor. Great self-awareness that you recognize that. Have you tried peer support? Yes or no, whatever. If they haven't, like, hey, we're going to acknowledge your request for counseling, but let's maybe start having a conversation as well. So we'll catch them on that side. The other way about it is that someone starts off doing peer support, and after having a conversation for quite some time or whatever, they haven't brought it. We ask, hey, have you ever thought about, seeking help with a professional? Yes, no. If you have, why haven't you? And for us, what we want to do is eliminate all the reasons why people say no. One of the biggest reasons is finances. They insurance wise doesn't cover it, don't have money, can't take time off, whatever. So that's why we provide 6 sessions, and they're free to use them however they want. They can go once a month, they can go once a week, whatever, right? So those 6 sessions are 100% covered. If they get to the end of the 6 and they haven't reached, some sort of homeostasis, or what we call like baseline, because our goal is to get them back to baseline with some tools from, some self-resilience and so forth, where they can, go back. That with the counselor's recommendation and their request, then we'll get them another 6 at a discounted rate. So we'll cover 75%, and then they'll now have to be invested. So we believe that you should be invested in your own health, in your own well-being.
Totally.
Next Rung's not here to be, you know, kind of your safety net in perpetuity, if you will, for that sort of thing.
Right.
Our talk text line is here all the time. You can talk to us, you know, forever. It's fine. But the counseling side of things, like, hey, we have to, you know, let's put some boundaries, right? You got to have boundaries. So the next 6 sessions at 75%. And then again, if it continues, then we go down to 50%. We go down to 25%. Eventually, you're off on your own.
Yeah.
But we can at least get people covered. So, and into help. And if for whatever reason someone needs the next step, so the next line of defense, so you got your peer support, your counseling, and the next line of defense would be like an inpatient treatment center, like severe trauma, you know, substance abuse issues. They need to go like be separated and go focus on what they got going on, right?
Yeah.
And obviously we have the IFF Center for Excellence in Maryland, the one that's being built in Hemet here on the West Coast. And we have some really great relationships with other treatment centers that we've developed over the years. Matty Fiorenza, you mentioned him. We just had someone go through with the organization he's working with. So yeah, we can help get people in kind of on a priority basis to treatment, and then we'll help offset the cost as well, either entirely or in partial, depending on kind of what the needs are, where we're at financially as an organization. And so, yeah, those are like the 3 steps, if you will, you know, peer support, counseling, treatment. And we cover that all. So, you know, over the course of the last 8 years, we've helped over 2,500 people through our talk text line. We've paid out nearly $500,000 in treatment costs, which is absurd. I don't know how we've managed that, because, like, you know, Blake and I initially put our investment in, and like, dude, if we had to pay before we even raised $1, you know, it was like, if I had to pay money out of my own pocket to save someone's life, would you do it? Yes, you know, type deal. Luckily, I never had to do that. Right. And really, it's a thanks to really gracious people who have supported our organization over the years. We have some tremendous donors who have stuck with us, that have helped keep us afloat in that regard. We have a tremendous fundraising director, Jennifer Henderson, who her husband is a fireman, and she's the one that coordinates the boxing events and all that. She coordinates any other fundraising grants that she can find for us.
Is Maggie Hernandez?
No.
Oh, I was gonna say. Never mind.
Not affiliated. But so, and then people that are, you know, so for us, a big thing is obviously being a nonprofit is raising money to be able to pay for those types of things. We have a lot of great people that, you know, host fundraisers, and they're saying, hey, like, we're doing for instance, I'll have people that are doing a golf tournament. They're looking for a nonprofit to donate the funds to, whatever. They'll find us, they'll ask, you know, so super thankful and gracious for people like that. But people can also go on our website and they can donate, you know, right there on the website, you know, on a monthly basis or just a one-time deal or whatever. We are a you know, legitimate 501c3. You can find all of our documentation, the 990 forms and all that. It's all legit. And so, you know, that's a big part for us. People ask, how can they support us? What can they do? You know, social media and all that is all great, but really kind of the thing that drives it all around, you know, our money makes the world go round. Unfortunately, it's kind of a necessary evil, because we hate asking for money, you know, but at the same time, especially in today's age when so many people are asking for your money.
Right.
And then when you're like, dude, I don't have much money left to give, you know? So yeah, people can go on the website, they could donate, to help our cause. Again, all the money goes right back into helping, get our brothers and sisters the help that they need and deserve, so that they can live the best lives that they deserve. And yeah, I think that's about it in terms of the organization wise. You can find us on social media at Next Rung and on Facebook and Instagram. We travel around. We will, people can reach out for inquiry. Like we'll come and do a lecture or something like that. We've got a couple different like topics that we talk about, resilience and, questions about how to start a peer support team or things like that we can assist with. We go to FDIC every year. We'll be there. We have, some cool swag that people can buy on our online store or whatever, but that's not we tell people we're not a t-shirt company. All right. We got cool stuff, shirts, hats, all that, but we're not a t-shirt company, so.
Totally get it. Well, thanks, dude. Definitely like to close up. And yeah, man, I always thought about like doing like a bigger event, like mental health stuff. Our department has thrown some stuff up, like I feel like they felt like an obligation to, but it was so like kind of like piss poor, you know what I mean? In the way it was set up. But I think there's just more things that can get done, and I think there's just like it's just we're having baby steps towards these things. You know what I mean? I think it's just definitely like more different ideas to have brought up. The boxing match is great. It's pretty rad going to that and good experience and everyone, all these little different booths and stuff and talking to different people and networking.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, thanks for coming by, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
Such a good conversation. That's just,
dude.
These are the conversations that I wish we're having more so in the fire stations and stuff, and that's a big part of it. We have our own podcast too, right? We got the Next Rung podcast. We're on firefighternation.com. We do a mental health podcast for them.
Oh, nice.
And then we do our own podcast. And so people can go find that on all the platforms. But, it's just like what you're doing with your platform and bringing the conversation to the table, and showing people that it's real and, people that are listening, your hopes are that they take away from it like, oh, wow, someone else actually understands or gets it.
Right.
I'm not, weird, or I'm not, kind of off the wall because of something. I tell people that no matter what you think, you're seeing the worst, or no one's ever seen it worse than you or whatever. Believe me, like if I told you some of these stories, you couldn't make this stuff up,
for sure.
some of the stuff that people have reached out and asked, for guidance and help on, you're just like, I don't know, like, how did we get here to this point, so it's okay. Like bring these conversations to the forefront, make them more normal, and hopefully we can change how we treat each other and, how we, just survive and thrive, as a whole, as a community within the first responders, together going forward. Because the idea that, our greatest threat or danger is ourselves is, it's just unacceptable. And we can't be living in that arena. So, whatever we got to do to change it, that's what we're going to do.
Cool, Charlie. Appreciate it, brother.
Oh, thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate you guys. I appreciate Next Rung. Tope, like I said, thank you. I've had long talks with him before as well. But you guys have done a lot of good stuff, man. I'm really proud of you guys. I'm happy to always have you guys come on here, vice versa, whatever you guys need. And just to understand like the dynamic of it all, So thank you, brother, for coming on and taking your time. I really respect everyone that comes here and sits in that seat. And it's a big deal, and I take this very seriously. I know everyone who sits in that seat does as well to make the change, So thank you. Appreciate it. And everyone, definitely I'll put all the descriptions of everything Charlie's talked about in the description of the episode. And please like, subscribe, Grab Lives. And thank you. Appreciate it. Love you guys.
It's time for Grab Lives.